This is Steve Robinson filling in for Howie Carr, and we're now pleased to be joined by New York Times bestselling author Ann Coulter. She's the author most recently of In Trump We Trust, E Pluribus Awesome. Ann, thank you for joining us here today.
Good to talk to you, Steve.
So I want to get into your new column that you just tweeted out about Jim Comey and his book tour, which I believe has been canceled. I think now that he's under investigation by the Department of Justice, and we also know that he was there was a Hatch Act investigation before he was fired. But first, I got to get your reaction to what transpired in Toronto today. There was a van attack, Ann, a van attack, and I said at the beginning of the show that we're applying the Ann Coulter rule of as the hours wear on and we don't have an identity of this man, we begin to draw certain conclusions. So what do you make of that?
Yes, the technical Coulter rule is the longer from a shooting, an attack like this, the longer it goes without finding out who the suspect is, the less likely it is to be a white male.
Yeah, exactly. And all indications are that this was exactly what we would expect it to be, a terrorist attack carried out. So there's a Toronto Sun columnist saying that the man looked Middle Eastern and he was angry. So I don't know if ISIS is out there claiming credit for this or not, but we'll keep people updated that as the news continues to evolve. But I just want to get into your column about Jim's Comey. Have you been as disgusted as Howie and I have been about this book tour? I mean, I really didn't think it was possible to think less of the man until he started doing these interviews with George Stephanopoulos. And one thing that you get into in your column rather, is this formulation that he has of saying, it's possible that the president, that Russia has something on the president. It's possible. Well, it's possible that Barack Obama was born in Kenya and there was an elaborate conspiracy to conceal his true identity. It's possible. You can't rule it out, right?
No, it's the craziest formulation, and I heard him give it. I watched a lot of his interviews Sunday and Monday, and I heard him give it over and over again to gape-jawed interviewers, where he kept saying, I never thought these words would come out of my mouth, but there's a 1% chance that Donald Trump, and then, fill in the blank of whatever horrible thing, colluded with Russia, is being controlled by Russia, hired the Russian prostitutes to urinate on the bed. And I mean, that's silly enough, but the interviewers, like George Stephanopoulos, would sit back in response to this preposterous formulation and say, that's stunning. That's stunning. You cannot say that the president is not colluding with Russia. Well, this is utterly meaningless. It's his opinion of Trump, the man who fired him. We know that he doesn't like Trump. Would be, ask me if there's a chance that Hillary Clinton was colluding with Russia or, eats puppies for breakfast. I can't say, Steve, that there is not a 1% chance that Hillary Clinton eats small children for breakfast. Ooh, it's stunning! It's stunning!
That is a stunning claim, and you know what? I think that the chances that she was colluding with Russia are a lot higher, given the payments that her and her husband have received from Russian banks and Russision sources. Not to mention the Uranium One deal. I mean, it's just so ridiculous.
Itself, consider all of this hoopla is based on this Russian dossier. Hillary Clinton was paying Russians for dirt on Donald Trump. That is the dossier. That is the facts of the dossier. Now, having a lot more money to spend than Donald Trump, she had, cutouts to make the payments, but that doesn't make any difference. The idea that, I can hire a lawyer to do something that it would be illegal for me to do. No, it doesn't work that way. She hired Fusion GPS, as did the Democratic National Committee. Fusion GPS hired Christopher Steele. Christopher Steele went and talked to Russians, often paying them for their information. Well, where was his money from? Oh, that's right, Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton, I mean, these are facts. The media are just pretending not to notice that Hillary used cutouts, and therefore we can't trace it to Hillary. This has nothing to do with Hillary. It's just this Christopher Steele. Christopher Steele hated Clinton, or rather Trump, but he was being paid by Clinton to pay Russians to give him dirt on Donald Trump. And it reminds me, I mean, it's the same with what you began with, the crimes that Comey has committed here, the release of classified information, that sort of thing, the crimes of Andy McCabe, lying to FBI investigators several times, and unlike Michael Flynn, who has one charge of lying to investigators, which, as you know, I'm very suspicious about. I want to see what his conversations with the Russian ambassador entailed and what exactly he said to FBI investigators, because I suspect it was more of an interpretation issue.
Yeah, that's been my impression too. Is that they asked him about if he discussed sanctions relief, but
sanctions.
Yeah, exactly. But he didn't discuss that broadly.
Said no.
He said something about closing down a facility or something that you might not immediately recognize as related to sanctions.
Sanctions.
Yeah, exactly.
When most people hear sanctions, I certainly do, you think of something monetary. We're not going to buy your vodka anymore. We're going to put tariffs on your products. We're not going to allow your people to come visit here. That sort of thing. That's what most people think of as a sanction, trade or financial. You don't think of it as calling the Russian ambassador and saying, hey, we know Obama just threw out these Russians from their Long Island compound. Boy, that was a good gig if you're a Russian.
Yeah.
Collecting absolutely nothing, but you get to live in the Hamptons. Anyway, he threw them out, and this was a conversation that was completely legitimate that Michael Flynn had with the Russian ambassador. My understanding is, and I think Obama would have approved of this, all he said was to the Russian ambassador, and this was the message being communicated corporately by the transition team, was don't overreact. Don't overreact. Don't throw our people out. Just, calm down. A new president's coming in. We'll work something out. And remember, Putin, in fact, responded by inviting all those ambassadors' kids over to, some government building for the big Christmas party back then. Look, I'm sure Obama would have said that's fine. We don't want a nuclear-armed power overreacting to Obama throwing Russians out to, be nice to Hillary, I guess.
Exactly.
So
I mean, it was just a face-saving gesture by the Obama administration after they failed to protect the country from any Russian dirty deeds during the election. That's
right.
That's what it looked like to me.
And I, like you, suspect here that Flynn was asked by the FBI agents who had already heard the conversations, therefore they were setting him up here. Did you discuss sanctions with the Russian ambassador? He says no. They charge him with lying. Now, the important point here is, and I'm sorry it's taking so long to get to it, but I do think that's an important point, is the conversation itself was absolutely legal.
Exactly.
Of course, the National Security Advisor to the incoming president is going to be talking to the ambassador of Russia right after some of his people were thrown out of the country. It was absolutely legitimate.
Well, you'd want it. You'd want that to happen.
Him to do it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the kind of things that you want to happen.
So you have a pure case of lying to the FBI, i.e. a process crime that they set him up for. Contrast that with Andrew McCabe, who's leaking stuff from the FBI about investigations he is not supposed to be leaking, and then repeatedly lies to FBI investigators about it. But now we suddenly hear, lying to the FBI is never prosecuted. Really? Tell Michael Flynn that.
Yeah, and we have to hear about how long Andrew McCabe served at the Department of Justice, his long and distinguished career. I mean, Mike Flynn also had a long and distinguished career, but that didn't stop them from charging him. I mean, do you actually think Andy McCabe is going to be charged?
Well, I would assume they'd have to. You can't be getting anyone associated with Trump on, these jaywalking charges and then get indignant when the investigators, i.e., so far, Comey, McCabe, Strzok, Page, letting them walk on more egregious offenses. I mean, I think a lot of these crimes are silly and ought to take a wrist slap. Often it depends what's being investigated. Obviously, lying, I'm never in favor of lying. I'm not in favor of lying in your private life. But lying to an investigator is really a process crime, and I think most people would evaluate that based on what was being lied about.
Yeah, and there was one instance, too, where they suspected that McCabe was lying, so they put him under oath. And he still lied, you know? So wasn't there any part of Andy McCabe who thought, well, wow, they're taking the unusual measure of putting me under oath. You know, maybe I need to own up to the truth here. But no, apparently he's the deputy at the FBI and he couldn't smell a perjury trap coming. But, you know, that's another point. But I want to get your opinion. The Comey memos were released to Congress last week. They became public like an hour later. And, you know, the mainstream media's reaction to them was largely what you would predict.
Stunning, amazing.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, this, like Chuck Todd tweeted out, for example, that this only gives more credence to the dossier, the dodgy dossier. I read those memos and I thought, here's a guy who, Comey had this planned all along, that he was going to write these memos and he was going to leak them. And we know now that in his book, like the biggest...
Even if he wasn't going to leak them, I mean, he was going to... I think since he was in kindergarten, he's been planning on writing his life story, which will be one incident after another of where everyone else is taking the easy way out, is cheating, but he alone stood up for truth and justice.
This is what he says. This is what he tells people who disagree with him. Your moral compass is askew. I mean, how condescending is that? But, you know, I think the big takeaway from his book is that he has yet to be made public concerns about Loretta Lynch and her credibility when it comes to the investigation. So there's some reason that the American people don't know.
Well, that's not going to get him fawned over by the mainstream media.
Exactly.
Steve, where have you been for the last 30 years?
But
no,
the
he
point...
wants to be fawned over. He wants to be described as Mr. Integrity. And one of the things I wanted to mention, I'm glad you mentioned those memos, was it was really kind of hilarious watching MSNBC as soon as the memos came out, because they were all, and some of them aren't stupid, they're such zealots, they say crazy things. One I will not mention began, this got the ball rolling. What's amazing about these memos is the memos confirm Comey's testimony.
Oh,
and
shocker.
They confirm his book. You can't confirm yourself.
But,
that isn't confirmation. And yet, every MSNBC show, that at least that I caught, henceforth was, it confirms his testimony, it confirms his book. Yeah, well, probably everything he has ever written since he was a small child is essentially the same story. Again, everyone else is corrupt and has no moral compass, and I alone stood for truth, honor, and the American way.
You know, on that note, Ann, I'm just looking at your column right now, and your column confirms everything that you just said here on the radio show. So we have to know that it's true. But my point about Loretta Lynch, Ann, was that he's got this suspicion. He kind of hints at it in his book that there's something wrong with Loretta Lynch and her credibility. But he never thought to memorialize his interactions with her by writing memos, contemporaneous memos. Why isn't he writing memos about his interactions with anyone else? It's just Trump, whom I think he was always planning to throw under the bus.
Well, there were a few other interactions. Yes, Trump is a great whipping boy in order to show what an honorable person you are. But one other technique he has, I couldn't get into all of it in one short weekly column, but one that I really like is his like Superman abilities to read entire conversations out of the tiniest wisp of body language. So, Obama, for example, raises an eyebrow at him in a Groucho Marx style, and we get like 3 paragraphs on, I understood that what he was saying to me is, you are a man of integrity. I cannot believe you have to face this vulgar boob,
yes.
Donald Trump, and good luck to you. I don't know how you're going to do it, and it goes on, and wait, you got that from him raising his eyebrow?
Yes, his abilities to interpret body language are amazing. As are his moral compass. It's never askew. It's always pointed in the right direction. But his one problem, though, is his stomach. He's always queasy. He's always a little nauseated. He should probably get that checked out. And we got to leave it there. Thanks for joining us here on the Howie Carr Show.
Good to talk to you, Steve. Bye-bye.